I read 70 books last year, but there were only 10 that I gave 5 stars to. And trust me when I say that I do not give out 5 stars generously. I must literally find a book absolutely astounding or life-altering in some way in order to give it this rating. And now that 2024 is done and dusted, I'm going to be sharing these books with you. These picks were ultimately the creme de la creme, and I won't tolerate a single bad word about them. If you're new here, hi, welcome, I'm Katerina. Thanks so much for clicking on the video. I make new videos every single week chatting about books, and if that's something you're into, why not subscribe? And that being said, let's begin the countdown in order of preference with my favourite book of 2024 being right at the end. So kicking off my list, coming in at number 10, we have Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This book follows a young woman working at a Silicon Valley startup company, and she essentially finds herself stuck in a toxic corporate nightmare. She's having to deal with working around the clock, horrible bosses, and even illegal projects. When she initially joined, she was optimistic, thinking that she finally made it. But the novel explores the dark reality of living in a city where obscene wealth exists alongside poverty. Some books just weirdly find you at the right time in life, and this happened to me. Before I picked this up, I was actually going through an existential spiral about work culture and late-stage capitalism, as I'm sure we all do, which probably was exacerbated by the fact that I didn't love my current job at the time. For context, I have now left said job, and looking back, I'm not actually sure if this book was what caused me to hand in my notice, but we'll never know. But anyway, I was so glad when I read this one I did, because I felt like it very much validated my anxieties and feelings. It was comforting to know that other people were going through the same thing, as bleak as that is. But despite sounding quite depressing, this book was really sharp and captivating, especially in regards to its outstanding commentary on late-stage capitalism and dystopian places like Silicon Valley. And I think I finished the book in literally 2 days because it stressed me out so much in just wanting to find out what happened next. But it was very painfully relatable, and as a corporate girly, this hit a little bit too hard to home. Because it really did show the trenches of living as a 20-year-old something in a big city, working a hard job. And if that alone feels relatable to you, I definitely think that you'd like this book, and I would recommend you pick it up. Coming in at number 9, we have Atomic Habits by James Clear. As someone who hates self-help books with a burning passion, trust me when I say that I was also surprised that this made it to my top 10. But this book was genuinely great, and I would be lying to myself if I didn't admit that. This book is essentially a practical guide in showcasing how small changes made in everyday life can lead to big life-altering outcomes. And by using a series of simple steps, it showcases sustainable methods in order to form good habits and also break bad ones. And it's all backed up why these methods work using psychology and neuroscience. So at the start of each year, I actually make 10 New Year's resolutions, which I know sounds like an absolutely insane amount, but they're more like little goals and aspirations that I hope to achieve by the end of the next year. I don't put pressure on myself to achieve all 10, but last year I actually achieved the majority, and I would say it's generally down to this book. It taught me that no matter how much determination or motivation you have to reach a goal, you won't reach it unless you have processes in place to stick to habits in order to reach said goal. And the author essentially boils this down to 4 laws. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And you can apply these 4 laws in every single setting in order to form good habits and break bad ones. And I've tried and tested them, and it genuinely did help me reach my goals that I wanted to. I'm usually so skeptical of self-help books, but hand on heart, I would generally recommend this one, and I've actually recommended it to my friends and family. So if you've recently made New Year's resolutions that you want to achieve this year, pick this book up because I think it would genuinely help you. Coming in at number 8, we have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is a Belgian dystopian novel, and it follows a woman whose life she's only known is being locked in a bunker with 39 other women. However, whilst the others were locked in as women, she was the only one captured as a child. She therefore has no other memories apart from being held captive. However, one day these women actually escape the bunker and they have to navigate the unknown world they're on by themselves. I originally rated this book 4.5 stars after I finished it, but this book stayed on my mind for so long after, and I still think about it so often, that looking back I actually changed my rating to 5 stars because I just absolutely adored it. It's speculative and haunting, and the eeriness of it really sticks with you after you finish the final page. It's a super unique and introspective story that mainly focuses on the main character and her lack of needs and experiences, and it makes her so different from the others that were locked up because these women were already adults, they had husbands and children. And if this woman has no other memories apart from being held captive, it really leads us down the rabbit hole of wondering, well, what truly makes her human? How can she connect and relate to the others around her if she didn't go through these truly fundamental human experiences? And it's one of those books that really leave you thinking about what the meaning of life is, which you'll notice is a recurring theme in my favourite books. I seem to get off on existentialism, but this is a great book, and I'm sure one that will stick with me for many years to come. Moving on, coming in at number 7, we have Foster by Claire Keegan. This is the shortest book on my list, as this novella is actually less than 100 pages. The story is set in 1980s rural Ireland, and we follow a young girl who is sent to live with foster parents who are a childless couple that own a farm, because her own parents are struggling financially and they can't afford to look after her for that summer. However, her foster parents treat her with this newfound love and care that she's never experienced before. The novella explores themes of complex family dynamics and the search for identity and belonging. I like the overall message of this book in the fact that familial love can come outside of your biological relations, which for me was a really fresh perspective on foster care in the fact that it's full of warmth and love, as I've only ever seen foster care portrayed negatively in media. I also found the author incredibly talented to write the point of view from a child in such a convincing way. Everything felt very innocent and slightly confusing, but at the same time the writing was very lyrical and delicate. And I was so immersed in this book, I genuinely had to remind myself at times that it wasn't written by a child. The author was also able to capture this dark side of complex family life, which I really enjoyed. And because of this amazing writing and layered characters, I was genuinely hooked from the first page. To write such a small book that's so heavy in emotion and captures the nuances of human connection so well is honestly really rare to come across, and I was genuinely moved by the end. I'm a Claire Keegan fan through and through, and I will recommend every single one of her books until the cows come home. Coming in at number 6, we have Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jedrowski. This is a gorgeous yet heartbreaking novel that's a powerful blend of historical fiction and romance, and it's set in 1980s Poland when the country was under communist rule. We follow 2 young men that meet at an agricultural camp that form an intense and immediate connection. Their relationship blossoms in a society where their love is not only taboo but dangerous, forcing them to contend with oppressive political regimes and societal expectations. And as the political tension in Poland escalates, so does the tension between these 2 lovers. And it creates a narrative that's not only raw and intimate, but historically relevant. It explores themes of oppressive regimes, forbidden love, and the quest for identity. I adored this novel as it really explores the complexities of love in a time of political turmoil. You follow the character's every thought as he's wrestling with these constraints of a society that forbids his love, but also following along in the excitement and vulnerability in his first ever romance. And it's almost ironic that he finds peace and sanctuary in his lover's presence, but it's juxtaposed by the lack of freedom that he experiences in everyday life. I just felt like the characters were so richly developed that I was actually interested in every single one, as you see each person's inner conflicts and desires, and they're all just rendered with such nuance and empathy that I was genuinely excited to read about the side characters. And it also just made the fate of so many of the people in the book so heartbreaking, because you just know them so well by the end. I honestly love this book so much, and I'm genuinely so happy I got around to reading it this year. It has character depth, profound development, and the perfect balance between tension and the tenderness in this romance, all of which are aspects I love in my books, and if you love that too, I genuinely think that you would adore this one. Okay, we are halfway there, and coming in at number 5 is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This is a British novel following a woman in her early 30s, and she's just obsessed with the guy she's seeing. However, she wants to be with him, but he doesn't want to be with her. It's the classic toxic situationship. And in typical fashion of not being wanted, she then becomes even more obsessed with her. Women logic is truly a confusing thing. However, as he is a toxic man, he's seeing other women, and she then becomes obsessed with these other women he's seeing, including his own wife. She therefore ends up literally becoming a sort of cyberstalker, forming various parasocial relationships with these women, ultimately becoming their fan. This sounds so weird given the synopsis, but this book was hilarious and so fun to read. There were so many things I adored about this book, but I'll give you 2 main reasons that stuck out to me. Firstly, it explores unrequited love in such a raw and brutal way. There is no filter on the protagonist when it comes to the absolutely crazy things she does to get this guy's attention. And yes, attention and not affection, because the bar is that low. Which, may I add, is incredibly realistic as someone who is a victim of today's dating scene. And I won't lie, if you've been in a situationship before, then buckle up, because this book may hit a little bit too close to home. It did for me anyway. There were like too many points in the book that I found relatable, which at the end I was like, ugh, this is concerning. And although it's a short book anyway, it's full of short, punchy chapters that allow you to rattle through it so quickly. And it has absolutely phenomenal commentary, not just on conversations of patriarchy, class, and racism, but also on social media, influencers, and our identity online, which is something so new and evolving, and it was cool because it's not something I've read before. And the novel was such an accurate snapshot of our current digital era that I was genuinely taken aback. I'm not sure how well this book would age, because I can imagine kids in like 20, 30 years time reading this like, what does a follow request on Instagram mean? But at this current time, I'm obsessed with this book. It's amazing, and you could say that I'm a fan. Coming in at number 4, we have The Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante. In this book, the story unfolds in the confines of an apartment in Italy, where the protagonist faces the sudden departure of her husband after he admits to her that he's been sleeping with a younger woman. And during the suffocating summer heat, the protagonist is left to grapple with the disorienting emotions of being abandoned. The book then delves into her psychological descent as she tries to maintain normalcy for her children, whilst also suffering an identity crisis. The narrative is a raw and visceral depiction of a woman's struggle, and an examination on the complexities of love, motherhood, and the spectre of madness that looms over the Forsaken. Believe me when I say that I could not put this book down. It was glued to my hands. It just had that unhinged madness and unfiltered behaviour from women that I absolutely yearn for. It's actually quite similar to the previous book in the fact that we are just watching a woman completely unravel. The psychological depth in this book is absolutely unparalleled as we see this woman's identity literally collapse from the inside out. We witness her experience betrayal, resilience, and the process of self-reclamation all at once. The writing is also just gorgeously unapologetically blunt, and it captures the messiness of life as well as the complexity of women. I think this book is actually very relatable to anyone who's experienced a breakup in any capacity, and it's extremely relatable if you've experienced cheating or ghosting, so proceed with caution. In 2025, I need to read more books like this with beautiful and unrestrained female rage. Right, lock in guys, because we are finally at my top 3. And coming in at the 3rd spot, we have Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. The novel is set in early 1990s in rural Ireland, and we follow a teenage girl that's trying very hard to stay on the beaten track. Everyone expects her to finish high school and marry her male best friend, but as she gets older, she's less appealed by this. And during one particularly spicy summer, the main character starts liking a girl in her friendship group in a way that she's never experienced. This fixation blooms into utter infatuation, and the lines between friendship and relationship begin to blur. And the novel essentially centers around two girls that love each other even when everyone around them says that they shouldn't. Themes include coming of age, complex mother and daughter relationships, and religious guilt. Oh my god, I absolutely adored this book. It was just impeccable. Whilst I admired so many aspects of it, I'm going to give you 3 main reasons why this is in my 3rd place. Firstly, as a coming of age book, I felt like this really captured the intensity and obsession that comes with having a first love. The very first time you're in a relationship, you feel like you found your soulmate, and the absolute devotion that comes with that. And it honestly took me back to my teenage self and remembering how intense those feelings were when you literally feel like you're bordering on insanity. Your whole world just revolves around them, and it's just so dramatic. I love it. Secondly, I think that it explored the complexities of female relationships really well. Girls that you grew up with when they were young start to change when they become late teenagers, and this can affect the group dynamics along with how certain girls can treat you. It's the love and compassion, but also the jealousy and sometimes competition that comes with that. And thirdly, the amazing exploration of religious guilt and shame that came with her being gay, especially in a highly Catholic town. I think anyone with a complex relationship to religion will really resonate with this novel. It was just incredible, and probably obvious from the title, it is like the perfect read for summer. If you liked Call Me By Your Name but want a girl version that's set in rural Ireland, I think this one's for you. I devoured this book and I would recommend it to anyone. Taking the 2nd spot, we have The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is a post-apocalyptic novel that follows a father and his young son, and they struggle to survive a world that's been destroyed by an unknown disaster. They journey through a desolate landscape of a burnt-down America for months, where their harrowing journey is constantly threatened by starvation and violence. And this book actually inspired The Last of Us game and TV show, so do with that information as you will. I know I've said this about every book so far, but this book was honestly incredible. I am a sucker for survival thrillers, and this book was just chef's kiss. It's one of those books that explore the meaning of life, but in a more brutal way of seeing what people stay alive for. And the lengths that this father goes to stay alive is incredible yet horrifying. And it begs the question, why does he fight so hard to live in a world that is so awful for him and his son to inhabit? It's such an eye-opener into the human race and our collective will to live. And overall, I found it to be an interesting take on survival, hope, and the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. Even with the father and son themselves, they had a very incredible dynamic and duo that was really interesting to read. The father once knew this previous world, so he's now paranoid, negative, and mistrusting of everyone, whilst the child has only ever seen this new world and is positive and trying to find scraps left behind of goodness in mankind. The writing as well is just so haunting and powerful, and it makes you as a reader appreciate the smallest things that we take for granted in everyday life, like food and shelter. And also, just to prove how much I love this novel, my biggest pet peeve when it comes to book is no speech marks. And even though this book had no speech marks, it was my second favorite book of the year. Some people might find this book distressing or depressing, but to me, I found it to be a really raw and real look into what an apocalypse would look like on Earth. Also, this book is set in winter, so if you're looking for a great atmospheric read coming up soon, then this one's definitely for you. And finally, my favorite book of the year, taking the #1 spot, is Miracle in the Andes by Nando Parrado. My heart actually bursts at the seams with love whenever I think about this book because I love it so much. I talked about it recently in a Q&A video, and I actually started tearing up because it's just so important to me. This book is about the true story of the 1972 Andes plane crash and rescue, where a plane originally carrying 40 people from Uruguay to Chile crashed into the Andes Mountains. And the book retells how the 16 survivors managed to survive the 72 days of horrific conditions. There's various books written about this true event, but this is written by the survivor Nando Parrado, who actually decided to walk the Andes Mountains to get help, arguably saving all the others. The story was actually made into a film last year called Society in the Snow, which I watched and was honestly so blown away by that I then bought the book afterwards. Not to be dramatic, but this book genuinely changed my life. I would give it 6 stars if such a rating existed. It's not often where I am so utterly gripped by a book that I cannot put it down. I'm a quick reader and my reading method is usually reading a few chapters here and there, but I think I read this in one sitting. I don't even think I slept when I was reading it, which is crazy because I already knew the ending from watching the film, but the book was so incredible I couldn't put it down. And even though I was obsessed with the film, the book is 10 times better because it just had so much extra detail about their circumstances that the film just didn't have the time to include. That was mind-blowing to read about, such as everyone's backstories, including the surviving and the deceased, which made their connections to each other so much more meaningful. The extent of their injuries, which was so horrific and graphic that the film just left out because it would have been too much for viewers. And it also showed what their lives were like when the survivors returned home. And this book was written 30 years after the crash, so it was interesting to see how their lives had changed since then. But to be honest, the part that actually stood out to me the most was the sheer incredibility of how humans can survive the most impossible conditions, both physically and mentally. How does someone find the will to live when the chances of surviving are literally near zero? The book explores that as Nando goes through his thought processes every single step of the way. I honestly think this is the closest book I've found that's let me really explore and discover what the meaning of life is. And it really changed me because it shifted my perspective on what I place value on in life. And it's honestly taught me to never take anything for granted. And genuinely, every time that I'm cold, I actually think about this book and I think, I can't be that cold if these guys survive this. I honestly could just talk about this book for hours and I still don't think any of my descriptions would do it justice. It's life-changing and I would genuinely sell my soul to the devil to read this book again for the first time. And there you have it. Those were my top 10 books of 2024. Not sure what this says about me in the fact that pretty much all of these books include a great deal of suffering. Maybe I need therapy, or maybe it just comes down to me being a Pisces. Who knows? What were your favourite books of 2024? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this vid, please give it a like down below, and if you're new here and enjoy me yapping about books, feel free to subscribe. I make new videos every single Tuesday. Feel free to also follow me on Goodreads, where I update in real time what books I'm reading, and feel free to follow me on Instagram. I post my personal stuff on there, but I also post books as soon as I finish reading them, letting you know what they're about and also what I rate them out of 10. And I will see you next week where I'll be talking about my worst books of 2024. I can guarantee you that will be a very different energy compared to this one. I will be a pure hater in that video. Once again, thank you so much for watching and being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!